This meeting is being recorded by video and audio means. These recordings will be posted on the city's website for public viewing and listening. In-person attendees of this meeting will be included in this recording. By remaining in this meeting, in-person attendees agree that their images and/or voices may be included in these recordings. So, excused absences, Melody has asked for one with an email earlier to Scott, Wayne, and I. So, all in favor, I guess anyone would like to make a motion to excuse her absence? Motion seconded by Luann, all in favor? Okay. Melody is excused. Barrett is running late, and we're assuming Marinelle is as well. Maybe we haven't heard from her yet. We do have a quorum though, right? So we're good. Okay. All right. Minutes of approval. Scott had sent that out in the package, draft minutes from the December 4th meeting. We'd like to have a motion and discussion. We can do that. Motion to approve. That's second. Josh. All in favor of approving the minutes? Thank you. Thank you, Scott, for that. Public comment. This is an in-person meeting. Comments may be made by attendees upon registering at the in-person meeting and indicating they would like to speak. The meeting will also be publicly live streamed. Comments cannot be accepted during the meeting using virtual methods. Communications from residents should be sent via email and addressed to Raleigh Stormwater at raleighNC.gov. We have, yes, we have Athena Wallace would like to speak. Okay, Athena. Athena, as you know, we typically get about 3 minutes for public comment.
Guys, it's me again. So I'm discussing stream bank erosion as usual and trying to figure out if there are things that we can implement with the existing policies to help reduce and mitigate the loss of land that we experience with erosion. So this section here is like a little bit of a wonky depiction because it's a panoramic shot. But right here in the middle is where a storm drain that goes from Edmund Street over Brookside, or rather under Brookside, and then daylights that run off into this creek. We're experiencing all sorts of erosion coming down this way, and then we are also experiencing a lot of larger land chunks being etched away over time. So this is a result of neglect of not necessarily maintaining that buffer. And I'm trying to figure out how we are able to address that. This is our riparian buffer that is basically what we have. If we continue to lose the land, then we continue to lose the chance to recover that buffer. Next, please. So this is just kind of like a nice little review of where I started. This is way over in 2024. Thank you. So 2024, 2025, and then 2026, just this morning. All of these faint blue lines, there is no soil. It's just gap. So everything continues to erode in really confusing, dramatic ways, and it slumps that upslope neighbor's property into the creek. Next slide. So this is kind of a confusing situation, and I'm going to hand out this little paper set here. So this is the top-down view as though we were looking at it from a map. And then this is kind of what that would look like in a 3D perspective. So it's easier to sort of try to match it up and see, oh, that's impervious surface. That's supposed to be the sewer line and riparian buffer, but that buffer is actually deteriorating. So if development is taking the entire lot up to where the surveyor points are, then they're using whatever area this is assumed to be and factoring that into their impervious surface limits. But what's happening, this whole green section here is of varying quality. And if we don't have eyes on that, and if we don't maintain that, then this is realistically not as large as it suggests. And if surveyors are able to put flags on posts that don't have land underneath them or may not have land in the coming years, then that actually changes that impervious surface to pervious surface, ratio. And what I'm concerned about is whether or not we should be addressing impervious surface limits using unbuildable land within that ratio. I don't know what it's currently like, but I want to revisit and encourage consideration to look into making adjustments to policy regarding riparian buffers, specifically for construction that's happening on creek-line properties and around creeks. Because if they cannot invest and maintain that buffer, then why are we allowing them to build the entire buildable surface with their property? And that's just kind of the question I wanted to throw out there. We're not asking them to invest in this. We're not asking them to do anything. We're not asking them to plant anything. So why do they get to account for it in their development plans? There should be some consideration in the other direction.
Thank you, Dana. We will at around 4:15 have an overview of Raleigh's, some possibly very related, the stormwater management regulations. So if you are available to stick around, at least to learn what we learned today.
Yes.
So
Thank you very much.
Okay, planning commission and the SMAC liaison comments, Samantha or Ben? You guys have?
Yeah, we met yesterday, Ben saw the presentation. I think there's one case that we've heard quite a lot about, South New Oak Road case. There's another across the street that we spoke about last time. And I think that there was a third that was brought to our attention that planning commission's hearing today. Andy.
Don't get logged in the fireplace.
Don't figure me out back out. Feels so weird, it's being low. Anyway, like Mr. Croft said, we have one that a lot about, and we're still gonna hear some more about because it got continued. But, and then one at planning commission that's adjacent to it, and then a new one at planning commission that we discussed yesterday, actually in our meeting yesterday. So, so the first one is a new one on the planning commission's agenda that's coming up Tuesday, which is the 13th. It's off Trails Drive, which is in Southwest Raleigh. Essentially, it's a two lots that are acting as one residential lot here that they're looking to go from R4 with sorry. R4 with the special residential parking overlay district on it. I think it's some neighborhood thing that they're too. And it's going to an R10 conditional use with that same overlay district on it. Sorry, I added in my notes to what that stands for because I've never seen that sort of BOD before. But if long-time SMAC members will just remember the property to the north here, we had rezoning a few years ago come in to do apartments in this area. They were going to stay out of the floodplain, but this is a very high part. This is real low and it went down very steeply. That is still not commenced. So they still haven't kind of built that yet. And it looks like the adjacent neighbor is having someone, they're rezoning their property as well now. I'm not sure the exact plans for it moving forward. I'm sure once it moves through the planning commission and city council around, we'll know more about it. But right now, there's no stormwater conditions.
So did the one to the north go to R10 as well?
Yes, it went to something similar to R10. Yeah, that's something like that. And it should be noted that all these properties on Trailwood, which is kind of near NC State's campus, near Gorman Street and Neighbors area, these are all in the ETJ, but not in the city limits. So they're a little bit funky. So a lot of the neighbors who are living out here feel like they live in the country, even though they can throw a rock to get the city problems. So, and it is fairly like rural looking development out here too, I would say. But right now, there's some more conditions. The first time it'll be heard via planning commission on Tuesday. So after that, we should have some more information on that.
And is that a stream? That's an open stream. We believe there, stormwater advice, that's a stream, not a pipe.
Yeah, very bad because I've actually been to this resident's property when this was being developed, and I didn't walk to the back of it. They wanted to see the stream, but it's not it's not people floodplain being hurt or anything like that. And this currently is developed as a single family residential house now.
When Bynum presented this to us yesterday, I think I misunderstood, because I thought that what was up for rezoning was the northern property, which includes the floodplain, but you're saying that was already rezoned.
That was already rezoned, but I think there were, sorry, I completely forgot to mention that. There's two other rezonings coming in later, like in a couple of weeks, not a couple of weeks, probably a month or so. And it may be to look at rezoning this property to the north, because I couldn't get the exact location, but they don't have all their stuff in. And there's some property over here too as well that looks like it's been rezoned. So there's multiple rezonings coming for this area, and I'll keep you guys interested as to what that is. But obviously from a neighborhood standpoint, they were very nervous the last time this came in for rezoning, so I'm sure there's two more rezoning cases coming. We're going to hear from the neighborhoods as well. So.
Yeah, sewer and water's a challenge there. This is probably, yeah, the other end of the trailway is a real challenge.
Yeah, from a stormwater perspective, I'm not sure if other commissioners see this as priority for getting more information about, and certainly would be interested in learning more about the other rezoning that's coming down the pipe that includes that huge section of floodplain. I think that's like a 4 corners, 4 parcels rezoning, but, yeah, I think, I don't see a lot of stormwater specific pieces on this. I don't know if others do.
Right. But you're right. When this one came in, there was a lot of discussion of the overall health of this area and the street health.
Are there any flooding issues on trailways down there?
Down here, yes, I would say there are. Over on this side of this village. But it's just here, when this apartment complex was being built, they actually had a notice of violation because they had some impact from their sewer basin that was overwhelmed during the flood. So they also went downstream. But these apartments are built.
So they would be expending sewer and water to this area if they did their
Yeah, they would have to as well. And they would have to get officially annexed as well as part of this resort.
I think that's always another important consideration for us to think about. It's just whenever there's sort of sprawl outside of the ETJ, the kind of like hidden impacts are the utility construction and that often isn't, the riparian buffer isn't in line places.
Yeah.
That's a piece of it.
But this isn't ETJ, it's just not the core.
Yeah,
I will say it's.
Yeah, it needs to be not urban growth boundary.
it's surrounded by the city. It's just an old vestige of the county.
This is just the aerial to the house here, mostly wooded except for the house and yard. And then like I say, this area is still not developed. And it could be in for any other zone. All right, next one is back to the South New Hope area, in Old Town. This is a property to the east of South New Hope Road, which is, not the one that we got the, presentation from the applicant on, but this was kind of separate from that, just adjacent to it, so that's why I wanted to kind of keep this on our radar as the other one is going through the process as well. So this is mainly still going to be a mainly commercial park, but they're adding some flexibility to allow for residential units out here, but this is still going to be the commercial hub for kind of old towns. It's not really a floodplain, it's kind of on top of the hill. This is a watershed boundary line. So it's sitting on top of two different watersheds on which line. But just kind of keeping this kind of in our minds, since we know that what's going on next door. But there's no stormwater conditions on this one, which doesn't really surprise me. And it's on the planning commission agenda for Tuesday as well.
Was the case that,
Sorry.
it was a case adjacent to it approved? It's like, yeah, all right. It's like, was that the next line?
Well, this is the aerial, this one is right. Yeah, so this is what they're saying now, just the way that it's kind of developed to go. And then our last real update is, South New Hope Road, same area. And it's across the street, this little C-shaped lot, as, Lanny called it on Tuesday night, which I really like. And this is, the one where we had the presentation for. They've got conditions that was here as far as staying out of floodplain. They did add going into the public hearing on last Tuesday night at council, controlling the rate of runoff leaving their site to 50-year storm pre-development levels. So that was an additional condition that they added beyond just the floodplain conditions that we're talking about with this group. As you recall, the planning commission actually voted on this case before it came for you all. They actually voted in denial, and but then it came to SMAC, and they've added conditions for floodplain, and then they met with BJ, and they added conditions for stormwater rate control at this point. They went to public hearing at the beginning of December, and also got continued to last Tuesday's public hearing, and they got continued until January 20th at the next city council meeting, because they're going to get some more conditions as it relates to affordable housing. But they are still in discussion with BJ. There was time added to this case for both sides, since there was an issue that City didn't get to talk on this past Tuesday because they used up all their time from the previous public hearing continuation. So both sides got some more time added, so both sides will be able to talk in the January 20th hearing.
Context to that. They're like, they're coming back with an affordable housing condition for 100% of the units to be at 60% AMI. If Marinelle was there, I did say to her, hey, that usually is a really strong benefit. What we're concerned, some of us on council, there are a few councilors who are concerned. We've seen this before. It's not that they're not developing in the floodplain, it's on there. But we've seen cases before, and you're kind of mixed on how we voted on them, where sometimes if it's adjacent, we deny it because we're like, I don't know if that it may not be in it, but it's so close to it. Does it affect? Are we putting affordable housing in dangerous areas? And I don't know if there's further guidance there. Just so you know, we're struggling really hard with this case because of that. You've got two counselors who are against currently. And because of the affordable housing, I think they're trying to bring more counselors on board. But now we're adding in that layer of, it may not be in the floodplain, but putting affordable housing in somewhere where we already know there's a smell, and that doesn't have to do with stormwater, but just what we're talking about. We're really struggling with this. So I don't know where it's gonna go. I really have no guidance or idea of which way it's gonna flow. We still have a conversation set up. We're planning to meet with Power Up, which is a Marinelle organization that has been advocating for denial of this case. So if you hear from us, if you have me calling, hey, help me understand this, that's really what we're going through. And I think in the previous case that you just listed where it's close to, those are things that a few of us are really struggling with when it's close, even when it's not in there. So if there's any guidance you guys can provide on what you feel that is, that would also be, it would be helpful. So.
Right now, they've committed to no buildings and no paving in the floodplain for the floodway.
And then also they've kind of cut off their variable route. They're going to change those maps to change out the map limits. So that was part of the conditions too. That took some wording to get to. They don't have the right of appeal boundaries either. So they're sticking to what the boundaries are today, and they're going to stay out there. And then they added the rate control condition between the December 2nd public hearing and the January 6th public hearing.
And they've committed to enhanced stormwater or sediment erosion control.
Yeah,
And they've committed to additional stormwater management.
Right.
Pre-post, comparison. Okay.
They brought it up to the 50-year storm for post-construction stormwater, and then the 25-year storm for during construction sediment.
Yeah, and the requirements by ordinance would be for during construction, sediment erosion control would be 10 and 10, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And when we say no, I think I've heard this too many times, but when they say no building, is that, I see like when people are developing homes at smaller scale, but they have like protected tree area, they don't go anywhere near this area. Is that the same thing, or they're not gonna have a final building on that area, but they're still able to disturb?
Yeah, they haven't committed. They've committed to the no parking lot or parking in that area or no buildings. They're not committed to not regrading the area that they're allowed to grade in without any sort of variance or anything like that. I can't guarantee they're not going to disturb the trees in there. I'm not sure the exact tree conservation rules for this area, because the tree conservation rules are around major roadways and streams, so they'll have a stream in the back, so they'll have a certain amount of tree conservation area there.
Yeah,
They're not actually committed to keep all the trees that are in the floodplain there, I guess.
yeah.
But they're not going to develop on that northern part of the sea.
Correct, no, they're trying to stay out of,
That'll be what the TCA is.
yeah,
Yeah. Okay.
And they're committed to no impervious in the floodplain?
to no parking area, no building, basically keep people out. So I believe they said 259, whoever was there, took it wrong, but they're cutting their side area by approximately half, essentially, like with these conditions. So it's going down from 23 acres to about like 11 and change, I think, is what I heard.
And just so you know, these are, all these are so helpful for us to know as we walk into it. At the same time, we also have to listen to residents. So it could have all of these, and they could have all of these protections, which are phenomenal, and they may be really strong, and the strongest ones we've seen. And we want to set that precedent. And at the same time, if I've got a group of neighbors that live right there, but they're still against it, even with all of this, that's weighed in as well. And so I'm not saying that they should do more. I'm not saying that they need to do that. Sometimes the answer is just no, because we're not just here to approve cases, we're here to create quality of life for residents. And that's really where we're having a hard time, which is why this is continually being pushed off and adding conditions and things like that. So I wanted you to know it's not just about the stormwater that we have issues. I think you guys have done, I think this was approved, right? Yeah, this was approved here. And
Yeah.
it's done.
Yeah.
So that along with the planning, so now we've got these two, which I'm so appreciative of the work that it does make us go, oh, I don't know what to do, I don't know what to do. But that's why you keep seeing this happen. So just want to give you context.
But is it not currently zoned for CX5?
It is. 6.5, mainly there's not a residential.
There's no residential.
That's
There's no residential.
essentially only zone for commercial development.
And that's the challenge.
Councilor Branch's biggest concern.
That's
It's like,
the
I'm
challenge.
fine putting commercial, but when you put residency there, that's what you're wrong.
Okay, and that seems to be the neighbor's issue too, right? Okay.
Yeah, they would prefer commercial. They're not saying.
That's not our issue.
Well, I'm not trying to say.
No, exactly. I'm just trying to clarify that for our group. That's helps. We've done probably the stormwater side of things and
No,
therefore.
perfect job. No, I think you guys have done wonderful. I'm not asking you to tell us how to vote, but I just want to tell you why this is not because they haven't done enough for stormwater. There are other concerns that we have to weigh into that. Even though you guys have approved it, it's still me. So I just wanted to let you know.
And I think it's a really important thing to be considering the tension, around putting affordable housing into or adjacent to flood prone areas. I think that's a really a huge challenge. And I think that challenge stems from probably reasons that go outside of our purview, having to do with, tax, low income tax, being mostly available to people who like biotech credits being mostly available in like flood prone areas, mostly available in areas that are not ideal to develop in for other folks. And so there's some like systemic issues there that I think would be good for.
Yeah, and so I'm not asking you to weigh in on that part because that is not your jurisdiction at all. But just so you know, maybe in 2023, I think it was off near Summit Avenue, that rezoning case, it was off Bayfall Street, I think it was, in which the city asked to build affordable housing there, but it had the same issue where it was right next to a floodplain and we denied it. So the consistency, the community's looking, going, wait a minute, how could you deny that one a few years ago? And now you're okay with this one. So those are the things that we're wrestling. Sorry.
Yes, Wayne.
Yeah, in that context too, it might be helpful then, the ordinance we have for floodplain development, not only outside the floodplain, but the finished floor elevation must be 2 feet above the base flood elevation at that location. So there is some additional buffer in terms of safety, or really not just residential, but any building.
Correct, yeah.
In terms of the finished floor. So that's built into the ordinance already.
And I think something for council benefit are more to that kind of understanding. And so I'll definitely relay that on to council as well. But maybe as you guys vote on these things, to help us understand
what that mean, how this is okay, if you would feel it's okay to build residential next to a floodplain because of X, Y, Z. I don't know if there's anything more you can do, but that's just the fine.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. With that, do we have any more cases to review?
I got one more
Okay.
extra information first only. I'm gonna try to set the expectations. I'm not looking for comment on this, but it's an interesting enough case that Mr. Croft and I have talked about it. It's something I feel like we should just at least hit on. So the next case, now on the full phone, yeah, so this is the old Kmart site in Western Boulevard. So this came up at public hearing last Tuesday as well as the public hearing in December. And the main issue was something called the Special Highway Overlay District, or commonly referred to as shot yards. Essentially larger developments that are next to highways, which the outline classifies as a highway. They have a certain vegetative buffer that's around here. And as you can see, this is from 2020 and this is from 2025. So obviously anyone that's been around West Raleigh in the past 5 years knows that NCDOT's been working on the belt line in that area for quite some time, and they're pretty close to wrapping it up. But they've taken down, this red line is the Kmart lot line, essentially, as it stands today. So that we don't have records of, we have records on the areas of the old property lines. And essentially they're coming in to rezone this area because they're doing some limited commercial redevelopment here now in the existing footprint, and they're looking for rezoning and kind of be able to build more dense development here. But at odds is the shot yard not being there, because as you can see, it appears that Kmart property used to go out farther, the belt line wasn't near close to it. And when the belt line expanded and they took out the vegetative buffer, they probably put in Kmart property, because you can see their parking lot from there and everything there. And so now there's no vegetative buffer there. There's a promise from NCDOT, they have a fairly robust budget to do landscaping for the entire development project, but obviously nothing's been done yet. And the city transportation department has not seen the plan of what that landscape looks like. So this case is kind of at odds because the vegetation is being lost. They're going to see if there's going to be any chance of getting some of this vegetation back, because obviously it does have a stormwater impact, but it's not actually a stormwater case that's driving it. It's just one. This has been a fairly public case and a fairly contentious case because of that reason. So just want to bring that up. You guys know it's out there. Not looking for any comment or anything like that. If you'd like to comment, we can talk about it.
Is this a conditional use rezoning only, so it's not going to be?
It's a conditional use, and the site's pretty much 100% impervious.
Right.
So even any stormwater regulation, now granted, a condition can be put on it, but stormwater regulations, we're kind of hamstrung doing anything about the existing impervious by state regulations.
Just for, that was passed, so that did pass.
Yeah, that did pass.
And 25 buffer, but they gave back 15.
Yeah.
So there is going to be a buffer, of 15 feet of trees. It just won't be the full shot of expectation of 25 feet,
Okay.
and not further.
And hopefully that combined with what NCDOT is going to do with their landscaping, will get back to the I think that's all I have.
Yeah, just one comment of stormwater interest to this case. Obviously, that pre-development was done way before any stormwater regulations. If you look at the little blue line at the top coming in from the north, that's Bushy Branch. That's the main stem of Bushy Branch, which was completely diverted all the way around in an 84-inch pipe, probably one of the largest pipes that we have in the city of Raleigh for stormwater conveyance. And then there's another stem that comes from the northwest there that is also piped through that same very large diversion, not something we would ever allow in today's development standards, but thought it would be worth noting from a stormwater perspective. There's a lot of flow going through that site.
Is it any possible daylight, something like that? Yeah.
As Ben noted, because it's existing development, we don't have any regulatory authority to require anything like that. It's basically grandfathered in as it is. So that would be up to the developer if they wanted to do anything. Certainly, technically you could, but it would limit the development potential of what would be done in that site if you were opening the stream back up again. But yeah, question.
I don't know that if they do want to expand the building area, we would not let them expand it onto the pipe. They would have to change that if they want to make a larger building, say in this area, they'd have to do something with that stream. And at that point, it could open up the daylighting option.
So, yeah, what they're doing now is like a 5 to 10 year build out, and what they got rezoned is 20 stories for
If you,
10 to 20, 30 years from now. Okay.
yeah, because if you notice, there used to be like even though Kmart hung out for a long night, there was like a batting cage in here, but that's all great. So then they're opening up like some other things in the existing building now, so you can see. But
Okay, so these cases right now, it doesn't seem like there's any motivation or need to have action on any of them.
No.
Yet.
I think the first two, well, the first one, especially in Trailwoods, once we kind of know more what that case is.
Yeah.
what the surrounding cases are,
I'd like to
probably
follow that, yeah.
As far as the two New Hope cases, I think at this point, now, in this case, like you said, they're going to pass.
Yeah.
I would request, in the Trailwood, sample, which is going to be, like I said, a few of them going, I am going to meet with the team next week. I'd love to have some communications, but I can share that with you, and we can free up. I hate waiting until after the event, then to go back. I'd like to be able to go in and hear the concerns before we get to the public hearing. So I will reach out to you.
Okay.
Once I have that meeting, or maybe I'll like to meet with you.
Okay.
And I get your break.
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so that was in our site. All right, thank you, Ben. Smith. Let's see, now we have your turn.
Yes.
Good.
Board plan is attached, as always, and referenced in the agenda items. We do have a stormwater staff update. I'd like to introduce Allison Acosta, who has joined the stormwater plan review team this week. He's coming to us from the city of Charleston, South Carolina, where she spent the last 40 years as a civil engineer, reviewing plans for stormwater compliance, is what we're asking her to do. So bringing excellent experience. Alton has an additional 3+ years of experience in private consulting, drafting, designing civil plans with a concentration on stormwater management. And she graduated from Clemson University in 2017, and she's a professional engineer. So please welcome Alton to our team. High priority topics. We're still working on implementing the new e-scribe. So in the emails that you received with the agenda package, there is a link now that's a publicly accessible link. If you would like to access the agenda through e-scribe, that's available. We will, for the time being, still have the PDF attachment for your convenience. Over time, though, please try the e-scribe. We'd like to ultimately convert and use the e-scribe agenda method. Budget development is in process. We are scheduled to make our budget presentation to City Council on March 9th at that's a Monday afternoon at 4 o'clock at it's one of their enterprise budget work sessions. And so members are certainly welcome to come to that presentation. And as we have in past years, next month and then in the March SMAC meeting, we will be coming to you with a 2-part series in presenting our budget, our capital improvements budget, as well as our operating budget. And at the March SMAC meeting, have a recommendation for a rate adjustment based on level of service and other proposals we are making. And if you all would like to endorse it at that point in time before we go to City Council, that would be the opportunity for you to do that. So just a little foreshadowing on the budget process. There is a web link for stormwater public meetings. Invite you and suggest you check that regularly. We do have some public meetings coming up. No notices prior to construction at this point in time. One other topic, and I mentioned this to Mr. Chair, we will be presenting the Raleigh Rainwater Rewards policy changes that you all have endorsed already at the past. We will be presenting that to City Council at the February 3rd meeting. and invite the chair, vice chair to come if you would like. Staff will be prepared to make the presentation. Since it's coming from, the commission as an endorsement, you all are welcome to come as well. We can talk about that and coordinate as we get closer. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Wayne. Let's see. Chaz and Manny, we have continued review of proposed updates for the drainage assistance and stream stabilization policies. We did talk about this in November, and I know there was some late breaking news as well from the city attorney, so we're still here to receive some suggestions, but probably wait to vote at the next meeting. Is that? Yeah. So,
Yes, that is correct. I
Okay.
understand there's a lot of new language. We'll go through that. So we
Okay.
can understand. Great. Give you guys an opportunity. Great to see you guys again.
yep, lower this time.
So we'll have a program overview, give proposed changes, then we'll review your feedback and meetings of the member commission meetings. Last staff recommendations and then a chance for recommendations. So our mission statement for stormwater was to protect life support, health, and natural resources and sustainable growth. And our vision statement is our stormwater program. We have the different groups that we work with that are highlighted. We are infrastructure and assistance down here in yellow. We work with all our various groups and capacities. We work together to be stormwater smart. So just a little program overview. This has been a couple of months as to what qualifies for drainage systems and stream stabilization. You have to own property wise city limits. You have to have stormwater on public property per street that is some sort of public contribution, and you're willing to donate a drainage easement or conservation easement. And we do not cover lots of long drainage or private drainage. So just to give you a timeline, back in 1989, City Council created a city cost share program for stormwater, understanding that a lot of these repairs, and you have seen the cost of the repairs can be quite high. So there was a cost share, as these are all on private property. These are for the private property owners to maintain. So there was a cost share program that was set up, and eventually over time, it was realized that even if you had, let's say, $100,000 project, which, as you know, when you get these calls right now, it's a smaller project, the homeowners can put in $20,000. That's, which was 20%, which was the cost share at the time. That's still a lot of money for them. So it became a fully funded city program in 2016. Then in 2022, five policies were brought before the commission and council. And in 2022, we also created the stream stabilization program with creation of the stream stabilization policy. And now, about 4 years later, we're coming back with a policy revisions, just to give you a timeline so to where this program has involved and come to. So again, just a refresher as to why we're proposing these changes. It is to align with the unified development ordinance and new stormwater design manual, limit projects that have structures, buildings, and 1 to 10 to 2, used for a buffer prior to the buffer rules governmental effect. Establish alignment with new programs such as stream repair workshops and the PIPE program. Help us slide on that just a little refresher what PIPE program is. And then what we're going to really hone in on is the project withdrawal and transfer process, that was a lot of your feedback, which we appreciated in the last commission. So PIPE, and I really like this acronym, PIPE Inspection Public Engagement Program. We try to be more proactive. As you know, a lot of what we do within stormwater drainage systems, we are reactive. So working with our partners and asset management to help lead this program, this allows us to become more proactive. We appreciate that and working with the homeowners and communicating with them as well. So overview of changes. Again, this was a refresher. These were from the changes from the 2022 policy. You can see we're going to hone in on section 7 for this presentation. That's where the majority of the changes are present. Everything else has really remained the same since when you last saw the change. So the feedback that you gave, and we really appreciate that feedback. It was good discussion. You asked us to identify holdups for improved projects. You asked us to provide solutions for the project holdups, and you'll see that in some of this text we're proposing here today. And then you asked for funds approved on, excuse me, we said funds approved that are unspent on approved projects cannot be approved if the property withdraws. Now the only concern is we spend this money, the property withdraws. How can we try and how can we get to a point where we are trying to deter property owners from withdrawing our program? Because that is money that the city can have. So since 2016, when the program became fully funded by the city, SMAC has approved 75 projects. 4 of those projects have been withdrawn by the property owner. 1 more project was withdrawn due to an HOA being defunct. 1 more project is on hold because of easement concerns. And 2 more projects are on hold because the properties are listed for sale. And so we're going to go through our proposed language and recommendations on how we try and do that. So the first 6 projects that I mentioned, the total cost that we have spent on these projects that have been drawn is a little under $100,000. SMAC and council have approved a total of $12.5 million since the 75 projects have been approved in 2016. That equates to about 0.8%, that $100,000. So again, $100,000 is still a good chunk of change, but it just put perspective of all the projects, it's about 0.8%. So currently there is no language of the new policy that discourages property owners from withdrawing. So that's what we would like to see. We would like to add language. I know there was a discussion about do we have fines? We have proposed 5 years. We're looking to make the language 10 years as we'll see. But I will say that on all 6 of those projects that I previously mentioned, when the property owners withdraw, we inform them that, okay, we were going to pay for these repairs. Here are the expected costs. You will be responsible for those costs should you decide to make those repairs. We also inform them that we will have maintained this project in perpetuity because we be donated an easement. This project is still yours to maintain. With that, let's turn it over to Mike.
Maybe Chad, what you heard from Chad, that's the revision of what we talked last time, question on the cost of the project that was withdrawn. This second, Chad asked me to go next with already, and I hope it's not too boring for you, and I'm not going to read all this. Thanks to Wayne, Chad, and our city attorney office for spending time since yesterday. Like now we have multiple meetings back and forth. Make sure that we don't rush, we have a good policy to be realized. So before I say anything, I want to say one thing that in Raleigh, we all know that when the storm comes, it doesn't check our calendars or it doesn't get the policy that we have, right? So they will make sure that we stay ahead and make sure that water flows fast. With that, so the policy that we presented in the last meeting in November, that talked about 5 years. And when the homeowner, they withdraw from the project before, until the deeds are recorded. That's the last month, right? So current policy that we are proposing now, it's worded differently, and it's more pragmatic, and hopefully this will cover all different scenarios. So, in policy without reading is like, I can't just rush. So, we see here that, so again, talking about the withdrawal from the program, from the project. So, once the city has spent fund, and that doesn't mean that spending fund by hiring a consultant, but even our city resources, our staff, will go out, multiple meetings with the homeowners and some in-house work that we do as well. So, any effort, any time that we spend. And so, based on that, if we have a concept drawing that we have developed And then if the homeowner comes and they said, hey, I want to withdraw from the project, then they could withdraw, but they cannot come back for 10 years. And that's something that you guys suggested last time, to increase the 5 years, timeline to 10 years. So second scenario would be like that, if, what if someone sells the house, that I just talked about, that one of the more than one.
Yeah.
So they can sell the house, so you have the new homeowner that's living in the house. In that case, we make sure to provide a copy of the work that we have done, the concept drawings, sharing with the new homeowner. And we give them, we thought initially to give them 30 days, but we are suggested that we have maybe 60 days, that more reasonable. So we homeowner enough time to make sure that they're income familiar with the issues, with the plan that we are proposing, and so that they're not rushed. So, but and it's up to the new homeowner that they can say that, no, hey, I don't want to participate. That's completely fine. We are not going to penalize them for that. They can still come back. Next slide. They can come back and again, they have to go through the same process again, submit the form and the application form. That we will score and evaluate. In this section, we are talking about if there are other properties that are involved in the drainage project, then the provision elsewhere that talks about the withdrawal that applies. So despite all that, the new owners withdrawn of the withdrawn property will have the possibility apply that we just talked about that. And will not get a period of ineligibility, so they are eligible. And then there could be scenarios that there are multiple property owners there involved, and then one person, withdraws, and the rest they want project to continue. In that case, so the project will need to be withdrawn from the stormwater drainage program, and the fund to be directed to other projects in the program. In that event of such withdrawal, drainage project from the stormwater drainage assistance program. The event of such a withdrawal of the drainage assistance project. So here, it's more clarity. So in the event of such a withdrawal of the drainage assistance project from the program, the other properties involved in the project where their owners wanted the project to proceed, they will remain eligible. Only thing is that they will have to reapply for the project. Then again, that has to go through again the city council, the approval of the SMAG, city council, make sure that they meet the requirements in the eligibility criteria for the project. So this is like in a nutshell, so adding the time to increasing it from 5 years to 10 years. That gives a more teeth policy to discourage the people, the owner from withdrawing when they decide to withdraw. And we decided that I know that we had expressed desire to have more teeth policy that penalty or fine or cost sharing. So I think the 10 years is good enough, but you're not adding any fine or any penalty. 10 years itself is a penalty in some way, like penalty. So, but not any monetary burden on them to pay initially or at any point of time to do the project life cycle. And then also, you added a language in section 3 that you will read, you will chance that every homeowner will have to fill the form, and that includes HOA. Yes, have submission to the HOA, so all the stakeholders they will fill the form that we will evaluate. So again, I really apologize that because from at the last minute, we have had a lot of holidays and all. So please take the one time, review the policy and guide us as to
We have one other recommendation, our last discussion, and I'm not sure if it's a policy in writing or maybe just in practice, and I'm not sure how that plays out. One of the other pieces was having kind of more checkpoints in with the applicant, so having more frequent sign-offs. And I'm not, at first they, submit, my understanding is that they submit the application, they go on to the process. But I think we had talked about having, an X% design, having another sign-off checkpoint. Are you still wanting to proceed? And then, and I'm not sure if that's going to be in writing policy, or maybe that's kind of moved in a different direction after that one. But I just remember us discussing that one. That's wondering how that played out in the end.
If you look at, there was language in there that talked about concept drawings that showed easements and infrastructure locations, which we didn't want to nail it down to necessarily a 30%.
Sure. But if
But
there
we
was
wanted to show that if there is a concept drawing, and the other thing we had discussed with our city attorney's office was not just extra, if we do the work ourselves, because there may be some situations where we do the design ourselves for some similar projects. So that was part of that. We didn't mention 30%. I know
Yeah.
we were 30%.
checks the box. So I think it's more of a, are there two things built in there? So if that was.
And then the other, I'm sorry. No, the other thing is, and this doesn't necessarily have to be policy, but we have drainage systems request form, so we will add another form that goes along with the drainage request form that states, okay, now you see these concept drawings, you understand this is
Yeah.
what the policy is.
Yes.
Yeah, so they're they're signing off at that point.
At that point, yeah.
Yeah, the 30%, that's the concept drawings that will show like the project locations, alignment, and how it will look like. So they fully understand, what the project when it's built, how it's going to look like. So it looks like a last minute surprise. It's just do something else and do something different. So we are being very mindful, very diligent about that.
Back to the chart, you had like one who had caught, you guys had run up $970 for the cost, right? And the one was zero. So 950. So the Onslow funds spent one, they can withdraw and start again next month. They just need to, whatever, for some reason they decided not to, but the one who spent 950, it's the city or private dollars, they would be on a 10-year waiting period. Is that how that would play out somewhere?
Well, these are all projects that withdrew under the previous.
No, I get that. I'm just saying under the new policy.
Under the new policy, yes. Well, these two did not have concept drawings. This one they withdrew immediately after
Okay.
SPAC had approved it. They just said, sorry, we changed our mind. So, or excuse me, council approved it. This one, there was some survey work that had been done. That's why it's about $150. They didn't even complete the survey work, at which point they said we're no longer interested. These next three would apply to your question. At some point, concept drawings have been applied.
They would have had to have signed the form. They would have gone through this concept stuff. There would have been money spent. And they'd be
Yes,
out.
and then you're for 10 years.
Put that last one on hold.
So you'd ask for in November, comprehensive projects. They're just concerned about easements.
Yes, that's unrelated to the.
Unrelated.
Yeah, got it.
But-
Just clarifying.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. And there's another scenario, which is crazy how to game all this out, right? So someone sells, they withdraw, but they sell the house because they don't want to live next to a stream that's degrading. The next property owner rolls in is like, oh crap, they learn about the program and they're like, we'd like to get in. Is it owner related or parcel related?
So we had a lot of discussion about that.
I would think the lawyers love that, right?
Oh, yeah.
That was one of the. We have recently.
And we have decided that it will be tied to the property owner in that situation because we can't penalize new property owners for the reason that some of these issues may not be, they don't have to fully disclose. So those new property owners.
Exactly, right.
So the compromise that we came up with was, okay, we will show you the plans. You have 60 days to review them. If you choose to move forward, you can move forward like you would with the previous property. If within those 60 days or after you chose that you don't want to be part of the program, we're not going to penalize, we're not going to give you the full 10-year penalty because you didn't buy into this. So you would just have to reapply.
Yeah, mine was more if they sold it, if they got the 10-year penalty, then they sold it. But the new person roll in and enter the program. But
We don't
it sounds like
have that.
somebody sorted that out.
But when did the 60 days start? When do you find out there's a new owner?
When we show them the bonds,
Yeah,
the concept, and that was in there.
That would suck if you buy a new house.
So you would find that out during the process.
Hey, we're.
They would, we would show them the bonds. Yeah, 2 months
I
start.
wish they could disclose it.
That's good. You're not punishing the new owners. So that's great.
Is that the 10-year ban continue with the property owner, or they move and stay in the city and say reapply? Say on the street?
Oh, you mean if the property? owner
Yeah,
bought
I mean,
out
it sounds like they find another place in the street.
We hadn't thought of that.
Yeah.
No, actually, we talked about it in a staff meeting this morning.
Wow.
And the thought was, well, that's going to be a new project. If they, so you're saying that the new property owner that moves and applies for the drainage system program, also whatever we've done, that would be a new project.
What's it really made sense?
We'll be more careful.
Okay. So this is for review only because you guys are still working through some legal language, legal issues. Okay.
Okay, if I could, this, and the real trick is the one we were tweaking the language of the last minute. Really is that multiple property owner scenario where we have a drainage assistance project that requires 2 or 3 property owners to all participate for it to be the most feasible and viable project. We move it forward that way, it's approved. And then one of those property owners withdraws. What happens? How do we proceed, right, from that point? And the new proposed concept and language, which we will send back out for you to review, is that at that point, the project would be canceled. Okay, if we have, say, 3 property owners, those are all, that's the way the project was approved and funded and designed. One draws out, we just cancel that project, okay? Then the other 2 property owners, if they would like to still proceed, and
there's an engineering way to.
there's an engineering way to proceed, we would let them reapply and then go through the process. They would likely score highly again, right? Because it's all based on the impacts. They would likely score it highly again and most likely move forward relatively quickly. We would have work already done and kind of pick it up from there. But it would, and this is for transparency with council, right? Because they had approved a project that, you know, was no longer viable with one property owner. That's why we would want to then bring it, the new project back to SMAC, back to council and proceed. If it's not viable under the circumstance where the property owner withdraws, staff has to say, is this now, would this be a capital improvements project, right? A different project? And then under that scenario, if it would score highly and rank highly on our CIP, we could proceed. If we really had to, we could then have eminent domain authority and condemn to force the project. If the public benefit was there and all the other scoring and ranking was high enough, then we would still proceed with the project under a CIP. Again, I think all of these our goal is to make all of these be rare circumstances. But we need to think through because they have happened and they've held up some funding, right? For how to proceed. So we're just laying this out in terms of keeping all the decision-making transparent, trying to not have staff have subjective decisions. That's why, you know, we want to just, one pulls out, we cancel it. We'll start over, bring it back to you all. We wanted it all to be transparent and have everyone involved in that decision-making process. So that's the tweaks that we were talking with the city attorney's office up till just recently. They've given us some language as Chad has put in the slide, but we'll send that back out now to you again with one more opportunity to review and bring it back at your next meeting for you to consider endorsing again if you would like to.
Do we have any, and this is, the stream stabilization language is basically going to be the same.
Yes, sir.
So
That's
they're the same, so
Or post drainage system.
we don't need to review it.
Does that all sound okay?
Yeah,
I mean, maybe a head nod at this point, we can take the language
Yeah.
and bring it back.
I guess with that, we have any conversation more about this.
Great, thank you. Good. Yeah, good feedback from the last meeting too.
Thanks for the.
Thank you.
Speak to it. Let's see. Looks like. We're moving right along. Let's go. Oh, is that happening? We're getting ready for you though. Ready for your motion to adjourn.
Yeah.
We're holding that for you. All right, here we go. Sally's gonna educate us on requirements for development and redevelopment. Post-construction world.
Good afternoon. Ben will be joining me, but he's decided to wait until we get to his portion. All right, well, I'll be talking about an overview of our development regulations and then focusing on the full stormwater and exempt property requirements, as well as the ongoing requirements after, we've touched on requirements after construction. So there's 6 areas our plan review team works on today. We will be talking about post-construction stormwater, not the other 5 areas, but I will note, you previously had a presentation about the watershed overlays. Those do include additional post-construction requirements, but we will not be talking about this today. So post-construction stormwater. So just so that I'm going to cover, because I know you all come from a variety of backgrounds, I'm going to talk some about kind of the general concepts and mostly about what Raleigh does. So post-construction stormwater, you can think of that as the permanent controls in contrast to the active or during construction controls or settlement control. So these are the controls that are in place in perpetuity. In Raleigh, the UDO calls these active stormwater control measures. That's the title of that section of the UDO. In Raleigh, we split these into 2 categories. So we have, and I'll talk about each of these categories separately, but we have exempt property requirements and then the full stormwater requirements. The full stormwater requirements, I'm going to talk about those first. That's what most people think about when they think about post-construction stormwater. So in Raleigh, the split between these is for projects with 1 or 2 unit dwellings. So a single family house or a duplex is all that's in the project. If the property is less than 1 acre, it's under the exempt requirements. If it's over 1 acre, it has the full requirements for everything besides those 1 and 2 unit dwellings. So for townhouses, for apartment buildings, for shopping centers, for schools, for churches, for government buildings, everything else, there's a half acre threshold between the exempt property requirements and the full stormwater requirements. So these full stormwater requirements, there's basically that a licensed designer, so an engineer, landscape architect, et cetera, is required. Typically, this results in building a stormwater control measure or an SCM, also known as an SCM. For the exempt property requirements, the idea is that for those smaller projects, no licensed professional is required. So a home builder could purchase a lot that's under that threshold, build a home, and not have to engage an engineer or landscape architect. And typically those don't require stormwater control measures. Those instead have impervious limits where there's no defined impervious limit for these larger projects. They develop the limit as part of the project. And I would say if you have questions, feel free to ask as we go. So this is just some examples of how those projects split out specifically for residential projects. So there's 1 house, there's a subdivision, but it's all attached houses. that 1 acre threshold applies. If there's a cottage court, but it's all on one parcel or at condo style, there's townhouses or apartment buildings, they have the half acre threshold. All right,
Sally, real quick, on the half acre, is there a time frame on when that half acre was created? Is that I mean,
this
you
is
can't go create
the,
that half acre lot today, right?
right, so it's the project size. There's something in the rules that I'm not gonna go deep into, but called common plan development. So if the project includes 7 half acre lots, then it's over an acre and it has to do with full stormwater.
Thank you.
All right, so roughly in the stormwater practice, we can look at 3 different types of controls or regulations. 2 of these are required in Raleigh: water quality related controls and peak discharge controls. Volume controls are optional. I'm going to talk about each of these. So water quality, the goal is to mitigate the impact of development on water quality. So we know that development introduces pollutants to the environment, but these controls are trying to mitigate that impact. The drivers are environmental impacts, their drinking water source protection, their human health, and those things are usually embodied in state and federal laws. And the metrics can be nutrients. The most common metric is total suspended solids, bacteria, and then it's tied to a specific amount of rainfall design storm. In Raleigh, this is under video 922B called nitrogen reduction. Our drivers are the eutrophication that can occur in the Neuse River, which impacts aquatic life, and that is in state law as the Neuse nutrient strategy. That is where our specific water quality regulations come from. And so we use nitrogen or total nitrogen as the metric to see have people complied with our regulations. And then we also have a driver from our stormwater permit it's related to the Clean Water Act. Basically, that says if we didn't have this, we'd have to have something else instead. And I would say we care about all the pollutants, and so do stormwater programs across the country. But usually we choose one of the pollutants to be the metric we're using to measure how you comply, because it's more difficult if you have to show you're complying with multiple different pollutants. The things that projects do to decrease or to mitigate nitrogen also help with other pollutants. So in North Carolina, we use in Raleigh, we use total nitrogen, and we use the 1 inch storm, so 1 inch of rainfall. In terms of what we do with existing impervious area, existing development, if it was built prior to May 1st of 2001, that's the date we first had rules related to the Neuse River. So if it was built in 1984, it's exempt, and we exclude it from the calculations. We just subtract it out. If it was built after 2001, but what is existing at the time of an applicant comes in. So this happens all the time. There's a church and they want to build an addition, or whatever it is. Those projects were subject to the rules at the time they were built. So we just need them to show that they're remaining in compliance, but they're not doing anything with their new project that would take them out of compliance. So they're not, they're not stopping sending things from their stormwater control measure. They're not, if it's a site that relied on forests to help meet their nitrogen target, they're not cutting down that whole forest and not doing anything else to compensate. So we're checking that. Under these nitrogen rules, there's a 24% impervious area threshold. If it's less than or equal to that, a project can buy offsite nutrient credits. So those are going to benefit the Neuse River. They won't necessarily benefit Raleigh streams because they may be elsewhere in the watershed. If greater than 24% impervious areas proposed, a stormwater control measure is required. And so I will say that this is a change. The rules got updated in 2023. We are almost always seeing over 24%. Just as Raleigh, as a more development in Raleigh, it's becoming denser development. So I just wanted to hit on, these are the types of stormwater control measures that people use to address water quality. These are the ones that are called out as primary SCMs in the state's manual. All right, next I'm going to talk about peak discharge regulations. So the goal with a peak discharge regulation is to eliminate the need to upgrade the downstream pipe system. So if you think about it, if you had a, an area that was pasture, gets developed, there's more runoff, you would need to upsize the downstream pipes. Instead, we make each site control to that rate that came off before, so that we don't have to redo the pipe system downstream every time there's a new development. Sanitary sewer handles this differently. They may people do sewer studies with big developments. So there are other ways to do it, but this is traditionally how stormwater has been doing this for 50 years. It also prevents increased flooding. So our regulations don't, if there's an existing flooding issue, the new development regulations aren't going to make it better, but the idea is that they won't make it worse. So typically the metric is the peak discharge, so the rate of water leaving the site at specified design storms. So a specific amount of rainfall over a specific amount of time. This is also known as quantity control or detention requirements. So this is me trying to be graphic. Not sure how it came out, but just as like a hypothetical example, if before development you had a pipe downstream and really full for 4 hours, that pipe can still not flow. It still has to be half full. Can't be any more full than that. It can flow for a greater amount of time. There's no part of the rules that says it can't flow for a longer amount of time. But typically the way they get it to flow the same amount is by adding detention upstream and letting that water out slowly at that pre-development. So in Raleigh, our peak discharge for almost every development is tied to the 2 and 10-year storms, which is about 3.5 and 5 inches of rain over 24 hours. So that 3.5 and 5 inch storm is that's the standard regulations. When there is existing downstream structural flooding, which we have a system internally that we document that and staff can pull up that information, then there also has to be detention for the 25, 50, and 100-year storms. So there's a greater requirement. Again, it's not going to eliminate that flooding problem, but the idea is that it will not make it worse. We do have some exemptions in our code. One is that if all points it's less than a 10% increase. This doesn't come up very often, but it theoretically could. Let's say somebody had an urban farm and they were adding a shed. That might not increase things more than 10%. And then there's also a possibility for if doing detention results in an adverse benefit, an adverse impact, or no benefit. So this can happen, say a site is next to the FEMA floodplain, it's next to Crabtree Creek. There's a huge upstream drainage area, and the small site, it might have no impact on the peak discharge. The impact might round to 0. They could show no benefit. That sort of thing. And then these are the common stormwater control measures used for peak discharge. You'll see we added, I forgot to add my dry detention picture. That's actually an underground attention we've had at this stage. And then I'm going to briefly talk about volume control, which, as I said, is not required in Raleigh, but is optional. And the goal of volume control is to mitigate the increase in volume. So remember when I was talking about my lovely graphics were up there, that like the pipe's still the same amount of full, but it might run for a lot longer. So this tries to get at that it's running for longer by taking away that volume increase. And so that could be tied to water quality, it could be tied to peak discharge, but it also can impact stream erosion protection. It can impact recharging groundwater. So there's some places in the country that have stormwater requirements around those items. And the metric is that volume of water of the specific amount of rain. Sometimes there's a recharge requirement. Sometimes it's a low impact development design criteria. So we have options in 2 parts of our code where this is an alternative compliance. We don't see very many people choosing. And that's because a lot of Raleigh soils are clay, and so it is hard to get infiltration. And so this, and we follow the state's policy, which in some ways 1 inch is 1.3 inches in Raleigh, and compares it instead of existing conditions to undeveloped conditions, which is like forest or pasture. This does align with our green stormwater infrastructure goals. It does, it's a great way to go when we can do it. But again, it's not required in Raleigh. Here's some of the stormwater control measures that help achieve those volume control benefits. So we're really looking at things that either infiltrate, that do a lot of evapotranspiration, or things like rainwater harvesting that are actually taking the water and using it for something else. All right. Next, I'm going to talk about the exempt property requirement. So as a reminder, that's the smaller sites, but under the 1 acre or the half acre thresholds.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yeah.
This is so helpful, by the way. Regarding the different options that people choose to use, do you have a sense, I mean, I have a hunch as to what the answer is, but do you have a sense of like what percentage of folks tend to go for like detention and wet pond storage versus like some of those GSI approaches that presented there?
I think it's a variety of things. I definitely think there's some like inertia of like, if you've always designed wet ponds, you just keep designing wet ponds. Definitely seen some of that. I think the biggest driver is, does this stormwater control measure do both? So the things we see most often are like wet ponds, bioretention wetlands, which can do both the water quality and the peak discharge in the same stormwater control measure. So that's a reason that we see less of like some of the other measures where it's hard to do both. So this is in section 922A, which is titled exemptions, which is why we call it the exempt property requirements, because they're exempt from the full stormwater requirements, but it doesn't mean they have no requirements. So the core of this is this table that says, if this is your zoning, this is the maximum impervious surface that you can put on your lot. So this would only apply again to those small things. And basically it only applies to things that were developed that were originally developed prior to 2001. Because if it was developed in 2010, it had impervious limits. It typically had impervious limits assigned to it during development because it was subject to the full requirements. So it's really tends to be the older infill projects that are subject to these limits. I would say these limits they really came out of residents' concerns about infill development and lot to lot drainage. And I mean, I think we can all imagine we're living someplace, the house are stored, it's torn down Now it's 5 feet, it's a much bigger house, it's 5 feet from the lot lines, there's downspouts pointing to your lot. That causes people concern. So that was one strategy here. I would say these percentages are much more aimed at peak discharge control, essentially, or than at water quality. There are some like very high compared to what you would look at to address water quality. So those went into effect in 2016. Yes. We still got complaints from residents about infill development. So in 2024, we added what we call the lot grading plan. It probably should be called the lot drainage plan, which basically said, here's your options of where you can send, if you're redeveloping one of these lots that's under the exempt property requirements and not required to do full stormwater requirements, here's where you can send your water. And so, a stream existing pipe to a vegetated area that's long enough to help slow down that water and infiltrate some of that water, to a surface infiltration pit, which is a gravel pit that comes up to the surface, or to a rain garden. And so the idea here was to kind of mitigate the impacts of that increase in impervious area and make sure we're not just pointing a bunch of downspouts at the neighbor's yard. These things don't totally solve the issue, but they help. We do not consider these things to be stormwater control measures for our regulations. These are the lot grading plan options. They're a separate set of things. That said, there are times that properties under the exempt property requirements do install stormwater control measures, and that's when if a property wants to exceed their impervious limits. And we actually, I would say we see this pretty regularly from like higher end, more expensive development that, they put in the new house and now they want the ADU or the garage and the pool and the big patio and the 2-car driveway. And so they want to exceed their zoning base limit. So we have 2 ways to do that. One is through volume control or essentially infiltration. And then the second is for peak discharge control. And so we do see small detention, usually pipe detention that's underground in backyards and front yards for people who want to exceed their impervious area. That leads me to the requirements for all stormwater control measures. So this is something we updated in 2024. So whether that stormwater control measure is required by our post-construction stormwater requirements, the full requirements, the exempt requirements, or the watershed overlay requirements, all stormwater control measures have to submit an operation and maintenance manual, do a recorded easement to protect that area, record a maintenance agreement, and then when they get to the end of the construction, do an as-built submittal and have that accepted before they get a certificate of occupancy, and then submit annual inspections.
I just got one question, I'm sorry. Does the city look at secondary impacts? And maybe we're talking about the same thing here, where, the discharge is significant enough that it could negatively impact someone downstream.
Yeah, we do not beyond those peak discharge requirements. So the idea being, if there's conveyance that got it past that land in the past, that's still there and it's still going through that. Something we did change with the 2004 rules is where, because we have some sites where there wasn't an existing conveyance downstream, so we did limit where development could be discharged to the right of way, a stream, or an easement. We've got that's created a lot of issues. ends up making some lots essentially undevelopable. So we are planning this year to go back and adjust that to adding 2 more options, one of which would be an infiltration option. So basically, if you do infiltrate the 10-year storm, which would be very difficult to do, but that's an option. Could work for some sites. Then the other option is if your discharge is not pointed at a building. So if it's pointed to an apartment building and there's no place else for it to go, you can't use this option. But if we had one come up recently where it's pointed at a school property, but before it gets to any facility at that school, there's an existing channel and pipe. And so it's going to go into that before it gets to the baseball field and the school building. And so in that case, we said, you need to show it's non-intrusive as it crosses the property.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Did you say you hold the CO or the SEMs?
Yes, we do.
How do you do that with big development, or is that just for the examples?
No, that's for everything.
Because of the way the ordinance is set up, we consider the impact and air quality public safety issue. And so we have the power to hold that CO. Now, we'll work if you have multiple buildings on like a lot, or like a CO, things like that. But fortunately, what we see is some short-sighted developers, especially in residential setting, they'll wait till their last lot CO that they need to get their work done.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I was thinking about.
So we don't-
fire protection. You don't have to build fire protection until it's.
Well,
Right.
a lot of times what we'll do for fire retention and wetlands, we'll let them kind of obviously stabilize the ground, we don't set anything there, and construct the physical attributes of that basin. But then if, like, say you're in December and the time to plant that would be in the spring, we would let you get your CO with buying the plants ahead of time and proving us that you bought the plants and you're going to install them. And when it comes around for your first annual inspection, those plants better be in it. Okay.
And then like a residential subdivision, it's typically not to above, they're about, it's completed about 70%.
That's.
That's
Yeah.
I mean, but there's people.
That's
moving into those houses.
Right.
That's wild.
That's really usually all in the city, 50%, and a lot of times you see these smaller residential developments that get right on that. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm not saying it's a worry-free system, but
I
it's working so far.
I deal with it a lot.
Yeah. But in, the part that I'm talking about is the active construction. So all these devices that Sally just mentioned that we have either for the non-exempt lots, or else you're doing a GSI device on a residential lot or like a small commercial lot for compliance, we do make you prove that those are functioning. And for how long? For as long as the device is there and as long as the development's there. So we basically have compliance just from requirements as part of your operation and maintenance manual. That's how I mentioned. You're supposed to be doing regular maintenance on all these SCMs throughout the year. But on an annual basis, we want to see your annual inspection report from a trade professional, be it a professional engineer, a landscape architect, or technically a land surveyor, hydrological background, get certified that these annual inspections that the device is functioning as like designed for the operations and maintenance. And so with those annual reports, we're seeing pictures, city form, and just detailed descriptions of maintenance activities happening throughout the year. And so we have a group of people that are just looking at this from us, just from a staff level. And right now we have about 2,600 devices that are keeping track right throughout the city, just over 1,100 sites. So I will say the only caveat to the annual inspection and the trade professional is if you have one of those smaller devices that's on a single family lot that's using GSI to comply, the owner is allowed to certify that device that they're maintaining it, because usually they're low and they're low impact enough that the owner can certify, yes, it's still got vegetation and things like that, and it's still conform. On the whole, it's a trade professional and certified that anyway. So that's what we're keeping track of. But maintenance, like I always tell people, is year round. So after that annual inspection, you know what the annual maintenance is coming up, because a lot of times with the annual inspections, the inspector will recommend what to do, like for this year, that device that we see to the owner. So it's a really good conduit for the owner to kind of get a good sense of what's needed for that device. And the inspections, the private inspectors that we work with are all pretty good now. Like 15 years ago, we were all kind of finding our way, but we have really good people around out there doing these inspections, and they are really proactive with their owners about letting them know like what needs to happen moving forward. And so a lot of times that means working with either yourself or a landscape company or maintenance companies to kind of make sure these repairs are needed. And like I said, document to maintenance year round and any major repairs throughout the year. So it's just maintenance is a full-time responsibility and it's a lifetime responsibility. So that's just why I kind of came in and kind of mentioned that these are kind of these devices are great, but they have to be maintained properly. If they're not maintained, they're not going to function. So that's essentially all we have as far as the post-construction area. And I think they any questions about it myself.
You guys, just like bigger picture wise, do you at all track the increase in impervious surface within the city limits?
Multiple, have a good chance.
Yeah, I mean, all the regs are great and it's like we're doing the best we can to control what is probably a net increase in stormwater despite the controls, right? So I'm just curious if we ever sort of capture that to see how much we're stopping or how bad the issue's getting or, just try to forecast.
We do. It's not for this purpose, but as you're aware, our revenues are based on impervious surface within the city limits. So we have very good records, property by property, of impervious surface, and that's what our fees are based on. So we do have a good understanding of how impervious surface is changing. And we are currently in the process of doing a non-point source pollutant loading model that will also, in addition to understanding that impervious surface, know where SEMs and other controls are that remove those pollutants. So that we will have, probably over the next 12 to 18 months, a very good understanding of pollutant flows throughout the city. And we're going to use that for a couple of purposes. One is going to help support our GSI master plan that we are proceeding into doing to help us set priorities for how to be more strategic for how to implement, where to implement green stormwater infrastructure. But to your point, it's also going to help us with a metric, which is looking at pollutant loading across the city and how well we're controlling that. Because as the city develops and we have more impervious area, pollutant loads are increasing, right? And SEMs do not capture 100%. So we know those loads are increasing unless we go above and beyond and retrofit existing development or do other projects like stream restoration or green stormwater infrastructure to help mitigate that existing impervious surfaces as well. So it's a balance. We're trying to slow down the increased loads, but then do additional projects that help take care of all the development that was put in place before we had any
Yeah,
stormwater controls
it'd
as
be
well.
great to have that metric, especially when you're asking them for the rate increases.
Yeah.
Just to see.
Does it go, real quick, is that, with the impervious, is it going to the flood model too? I mean, it's the amount, at some point you've had the model out, game out for the next 20 years, right? So, okay.
No, it definitely does. And I mean, it definitely makes a difference because if you looked on our flood maps, there's what we enforce is where it's applicable is the 100-year future area, which is actually based on what's on the ground, or no, what could be on the ground based on the existing zone. So we actually enforce that for our flood regulations now, and to kind of future-proof some of that stuff is a factor of safety. But normally, a flood map is based on what's on the impervious on the ground today, and we based our future layer kind of off what is the current zoning and what could be built. That was just as happening there. So that's a good example of how we're kind of incorporating that into our flood mapping. And we hope to continue that when the cooperative technical partner to move farther for sure. Building that in, but right now that's just in FEMA areas.
Are you doing it with future land use map at all, or?
Comparison wise, it's tough because it's tough to get a good handle on where that translates to, but straight through there. So that's why it's only makes it a little bit easier.
Yeah, and then, and for flood studies that have to get done as part of development that are upstream of the areas, we also require that it be based on zoning, so that it takes into account that future development.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that I'm understanding the impervious limits correctly. So the limiting factor with impervious, if it's not exempt and they're going above 24% and using SEMs on site, the limiting factor is really just that they have to do peak volume control. So they don't, there's no like actual threshold for.
That's correct. We have had people assume 100% impervious. So that's what downtown South did. They said, we're gonna assume this is an urbanized development. We're gonna assume, even if there's a little bit of landscaping, we'll just call it all impervious and design our control measures for that, which makes the control measures bigger.
Yeah.
But yeah, that is a possibility. Now that's mitigated by other parts of the zoning regulations. So in a lot of zoning districts, they're actually required to have landscape areas. So under zoning regulations, so that they may not be able to get up to 100, but.
And that's different for watershed overlays, of course. There's.
Yeah.
One other quick question, what is the reason, I'm sure it's a good reason, I just don't understand, I don't quite understand it, that the water quality controls, kind of like TN metric is for the 1-inch storm, whereas peak discharge is for like 3.4 or 4.9.
Yeah, so that kind of gets back to the history of stormwater management, which is one of the many things I love to talk about. So stormwater management regulations started by just like, hey, we're having some flooding. We need to control how much flow is coming here. And that's when that came into play. And the water quality really is tied to the Clean Water Act and that evolution. When people were looking at how to develop the metrics for the water quality, it really is an optimization exercise. So the most common way to do it is to say, let's look at our 90th percent storm. So if there's all the storms that happen in a year, most of them are, in Raleigh, most of them are less than an inch. Some of them are bigger than an inch. And it basically was, well, if we could treat 90% of the storms, that's pretty good. To treat that last 10% is much harder. We have to build much larger things to treat it. And so, and then we basically rounded to 1 inch. It was in that ballpark and we rounded to 1 inch.
Yeah, I was glad.
You heard the term the first flush. That's the first instance when most of the contaminants on roads and stuff get picked up is during that first inch of people.
Thank you.
Just again, for clarity and kind of bringing you into when we on council are talking about some of these cases and how these issues come up, we have in plans, but we'll use North Hills, because that's it, it's coming up as an example. They have a small area plan which has specifies these community benefits, one of them being stormwater management. So you'll see in the case that they do have a stormwater, they don't go into specifics in that, and that's where, for me, I can only speak for me on council, I get kind of like, are all options that are they all created equal? I don't know, like, would it be better for North Hills to do one or the other, of which, if I'm in conversation with Kane, I can say, hey, actually, for yours, this would be good, I don't know those things. So that's really, I don't know, I'm not sure, so I don't know how to advocate properly.
Yeah, so we actually, if Wayne's okay with it, we could send you a past SMAC presentation where we talked about what are examples of good rezoning conditions. And so one of the things we talked about is rather than saying you should have permeable pavement or you should have green fruit, because we said, it's better to focus on the benefit. So is the benefit to treat a 1 inch storm? There's a lot of different ways to do that, but if they commit to treating a 1 inch storm for the whole property, or maybe that's not feasible, like in redevelopment, it might not be feasible. So maybe they can commit to doing, like we've had a project commit to doing 30% of their water quality treatment with complete green stormwater infrastructure. The other 70% might be something underground. But that at least gets 30% of it to have those multiple benefits of, plants for pollinators and infiltration and evapotranspiration and that sort of thing.
Right, and I think for me, I struggle to help connect the dots is with the community. Because if the community will see this, they don't have the different side. of it.
Yeah.
So they'll be like, oh, I want to see a detention thing. And you're like, this is not the best in this case. And that's where we are struggling. And it's not because it's not written properly, the things written properly.
Yeah.
It's how you as the people who are in communication with residents explain that. And that's where you'll find council struggle a lot. Like, I don't know, we're not experts like you guys at this table are and understand all of that. And how do you translate it to the community? I think assistance from the board on being able to explain that is something that would be beneficial for council. And so that's my one comment. And then my second thing is a question. And at the beginning, we talked about peak flow and how you do, there are two different ways. We do it one way and there's other ways of doing it study-wise. There are studies that are done. What is the benefit to doing this way instead of studies?
Yeah, so this, I will say, like Raleigh Water for sewers, they require big developments to do studies. And then some projects have to upgrade sewers. That is traditionally not how stormwater is done. And so basically, because the amount of stormwater is increasing incrementally, each project is taking care of their own and not having to go to the roads and rip up the pipes. And, because we potentially for miles and miles have to upsize something.
Right.
And there would potentially be a flooding impact downstream.
So this is the better.
This is the better option for sure.
Yeah, a lot of other municipalities have what's called the 10% rule, which is basically go downstream to a point where your project only accounts for 10% of the watershed. You do analysis, a peak analysis for that site. But the problem with it you run into is that's not the property you can't control. You can't go on something downstream and fix things. It gets so the policy that the city has.
Yeah.
Actually a pretty good policy for that. You have to control what you can control.
Right. So the struggle that council has is always how do we communicate this out? Because there's no doubt from a novice side of me that this is what we're doing is great. Like, I'm not at all judging that. It's always how do I get this to a digestible explanation to people who are going to come and demand things that they don't know. And they're going to say, I want this, I want this, I want to study, I want this, and it all sounds good because I'm like, oh, I guess it all sounds great. And then I don't know how to best communicate to them that that's not the best way to do it because ABC. So those are things that I should say your assistance and your guidance on how to have that conversation with the community would be really impactful for council. So just wanted to.
Yeah, that's an interesting challenge for us to be a little more engaged at that level. Those are the two real experts in the world. And anyway, you guys can take the traveling, this road show on the road to, I think CSCs are back, I don't know, but to places and have the conversation. I think it would also be with the education group at Stormwater, could be good. I do think we need to get more involved early on with Samantha and Ben and Bynum trying to us being aware of projects that may not even be that we think are stormwater related, but obviously this question at North Hills because the amount of our, somewhere there's immense impervious surface and there's concerns of truly adjacent neighbors. With that density, I think that's, I don't know. I'm trying to figure out how do we not get pulled into one-on-one dialogue but yet we don't want to not be a resource either. So that's trying to figure that out, how we fit there.
For sure, there's no answer today. I just want to, as I'm using my liaison role with you guys, I want you to know the problems that we take as well. I love this is amazing that you're getting the education, but 99.9% of the rest of the city doesn't get that.
Yeah.
And so it's my job to say, hey, these are the things that I'm dealing with. And we talk, I'll talk to staff and I'm not at all, so they're great, but how do we use us as me being a liaison to you as a way to begin? We don't have to solve it all. And, we're not going to solve it. I'm not asking you to fix it. We want to take it 2% higher? How do we just gradually increase the education level so that in my 5 Points area where I'm here having a lot of, like, I have to go to meetings all the time because my 5 Points area is struggling so bad. And so they're gonna look at this and disregard everything that's said because they're like, you don't understand, you're not living what I'm living, and it's horrible. So I'm trying to take this to the next level for me as a counselor, to be able to show them, no, we are doing the work, even though I see you don't feel this, and I respect that. I understand that you don't feel that, but I need to help you know that our stormwater team, they know all of this, and we're trying to paint a bigger picture of the city. So again, it doesn't need to be solved tomorrow.
Can I put Wayne and Nicola and I think we could, yeah, strategize.
That'd be great. That'd be great. Thank you.
But it is a delicate, I mean, and I live near one of those, if you want, you know, talk to somebody, but, it is like, to my point, like, we are getting more, like, it is increasing, so that is also like true. We are doing the best we can, and more than a lot of other places do to help everyone.
Is the city with that increase in education? I know some other municipalities do, have done some studies. Like, we require the 10-year. If you're developing this property, how big would the advice have to be there? You know, the 21 years. And it's not an incremental expense usually, but
Long term, that might be.
long term, yeah, they're.
The ways and sense.
Significant.
I would suggest to counselors is, if 5 Points is such an issue. I grew up in 5 Points and I grew up on the street with those, still has no storm control measures. So there's plenty of them there. So maybe 5 Points is where the first meeting is. To start,
Well,
start addressing it.
Well, I was just gonna say, for like the 5 Points in the older part of town, the biggest thing we've done in the past 20 years is this record.
Yeah.
I mean, that's, we can detain to the 100-year storm in 5 Points, but where you put that water, that's what the issue is gonna be in 5 Points.
Yeah.
Where that water is. And I mean, it's just, and it's different for the parts of town. It's gonna be different for out the center development, like you said. There's a multitude of streets here inside the development line that I can't be looking, finding it. It's just like, there's no drainage.
I think that's also where this is what we require with development plans, if you were applying to development, but that goes hand in hand with the work being done by the other parts of the stormwater commission, where we're, you know, doing watershed studies, and we're doing asset management, and we're looking at, you know, things that can happen not as capital projects and not. So.
I think just to Barrett's point, you know, there's so much good work being done in the city, and there are increasing challenges from added growth and climate change, and there's certainly room to do more. I think like one of the things that we've talked about a lot is where are the opportunities to add and improve the EO. And so I think like better understanding this is a good way to have a baseline conversation for having that next set of conversation.
Yeah, so that helps.
I think, doesn't Charlotte, don't they have like playing fields where they send the water when they're large rain events? And then the rest of the time it's just a playing field, but it's designed so it's gonna be some sort of retention.
Yeah, I think that's Smoky Hollow.
Smoky Hollow is a great example
Okay.
of, yeah, passive use.
Yeah,
It's designed to flood, it still has, you know, good public purpose
Right.
during dry weather.
Exactly.
Yeah, definitely, that's an important strategy that we use as, look at part of our watershed studies as well.
Yeah.
Do you all think that there should be more focus on volume control from a regulatory perspective? I'm saying that because I intuitively think that it's probably a better metric over the long run.
Yeah.
Just for disclosure, but I'm just kind of curious what you think. If you could sort of set the regulations up to be the most effective. as possible.
Are you asking is volume control or quality control, Dave?
Yeah, what you were saying, basically, the volume control measures are voluntary now. And that's cool, but like, if you're looking at 100 years of Raleigh, should some of those be more required? Can you negotiate with North Oaks when they're building down a building that will last, 50+ years to put an upsized volume control thing? Yeah.
Right, yeah.
Because we have one shot when they're building North Oaks, right? That's gonna last 50 years.
Yeah.
And if we don't present it, then they might not consider it. Right? I don't know.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I've got a comment on that. very few people know this, but it's case law. Went to the US Supreme Court. It was Washington State. I can't remember the PUD that was also in the court case, but Sandra Day O'Connor wrote the majority opinion. And she said that the Clean Water Act absolutely addresses quantity as well as quality, and that the distinction where she is between the two is artificial at best. And no one has ever moved that forward, but it's there. It's in case law.
Yeah, I can just tell you, as someone who sells nitrogen credits, no one is counting the amount of nitrogen in any of the
No,
loading or the offsetting, really, they're just guessing. And at least you can guess volume better than you can guess.
Well, I would think it was modeling instead of monitoring.
Your modeling, unfortunately, I said, someone told me that models are never right, but sometimes useful.
Yes.
I disagree with the
Maybe not the floodplain, but in terms of nutrient, I mean, what, you know. That's
Volume control is tough though.
And I was just to say, it's a practical thing, because unfortunately, in my county and in Durham County and other kinds of counties, I like getting up to infiltrate. I mean, I would say, this is my stormwater opinion, infiltration is the Cadillac option. And if we could do it everywhere, I'd want to do it. Like I always enjoy some people at the beach that have sand soil.
Right.
Send the water down and be good and be done with it. But yeah, I mean, the only thing I will say about the infiltration is that what Wayne referenced in South too, when you're talking about that first inch of rainfall. A lot of people that are seeing the big impacts are seeing the impacts on a much larger scale. So
Right.
have something in place too
For
for
the
that as
big.
well. So it's kind of either or. But I think from a water quality standpoint, the infiltration is definitely Cadillac option.
Yeah, we, as part of our city agreements from our infrastructure policy, that requires all the city projects to look at that as an option for the regulatory compliance.
Yeah.
In addition to above and beyond. And so we're trying to do what the city said, but you know, we're reviewing a fire station where there's just not space to do that, and we still need a fire station. So,
Right, so it's just a bigger planning, like the playing fields for the, you know, Smoky Valley could be a success taking that parking lot. But I think in Houston, which has even worse soils than us, and like, they have highways developed to like pull the flood cover. Their housing developments have ponds that are designed to like, they're recreational ponds that are designed to flood and hold water. Just kind of scaling up, that's why I was curious about the metric, like the city as a whole, how much of us is, of our city is getting paved every year. And so we can see that, you know, we can argue about the lot details all day long, but tide is still coming in, so to speak.
Yeah.
And the nutrients are, again, last thing, the nutrients are for traditionally the benefit of the estuary, which, as everyone will say, is a long ways away from here. And the volume focus would be able to let us to focus more on the issue that we have in the city, which is the flooding.
yeah, I would give from Maryland. Maryland has a recharge component. It's actually very small and it's based on your soil type. And so if you're in a sandy soil, like if you're in the coastal plain, you have to do a lot of infiltration. If you're in the Piedmont, you do, I think it's like 0.2 inches gets infiltrated, which is a much more reasonable amount to do. And I know that DEQ has looked at that sort of system for the FES and Jordan Mills. It's still under discussion.
Yeah, because that's are you guys tracking policy, Jordan? Okay.
Okay, so we're gonna talk watersheds and larger scale stuff for the upcoming meeting. That's right. So that's 4:57 right now. So we've had some great time off. I just thank you very much. This was awesome. And thanks to everybody for the lively conversation. But we do need to wrap it up. So thank you. And with that in mind, there are some preliminary topics for February, March, you know, and even moving forward. One of them will be kind of water supply, watershed connections, but also we can get back into the conversation as needed about, you know, larger scale statewide measures and stuff, I think. We also talked about learning more about erosion, the temporary controls. So sometime in the spring, or summer, we'll have a conversation about sediment and erosion control, so we can learn a little bit there as well. And Wayne already mentioned, we're gonna learn about the budget, two-step process there too. The last item, that is a very optional brief field tour of the Spotswood SCM retrofit, which we've seen before. We're not gonna go on the construction site today. We would go out, turn right on Spotswood and park, and Kyle is there waiting. He'll kind of point a few things out, so if anybody would like to join, that'll happen right after this meeting. So it's an optional for, knowing that we're at 5 o'clock. So, anything else? I guess anybody else? Sorry to cut everybody off. I'm just trying to put some time.
And we haven't done any motions today.
I think I got you.
Second.
Okay. I mean, you gotta be a part of this. Nicely done. All right, so we are adjourned. Okay.